Hello, everybody, and welcome to Richmond Kickers Weekly. Thank you to the Red Army for playing us in. Thank you to myself for being here, but not Daryl Grove, my usual co-host. Instead, I have a new co-host all the way from New Jersey. It's Mr. Ira Jersey. Ira, thank you very much for talking Richmond Kickers with me.
Great to be here. Second time on Richmond Kickers Weekly. Really excited.
I think last time you were like sitting in, we were all about to go get lunch, and then we ended up just kind of asking you questions, and it turned into an impromptu recording session, which I very much enjoyed.
Yeah, that was fun.
But yeah, this one a bit more planned out, I should say, because Ira has been watching some Richmond Kickers throughout the season for his podcast, the League One Fun podcast. Ira, for folks who aren't familiar, can you explain a little bit about the show and what y'all do?
Sure. So League One Fun is basically a survey show where we watch all of the games in USL League One and basically discuss them. We talk about the news. We talk about, kind of all of the teams, both tactically and technically. And we also do interviews with players and coaches as well. So earlier in the year when I was down in Richmond, for example, I talked to Coach Bulow as well as a couple of the players. I've only missed 6 matches of USL League One so far this year. And it's been been a real labor of love.
I feel like most of the labor part of that was Richmond Kickers related.
That was certainly part of it. So I have an affinity to Richmond because of not only because of you guys, and obviously I've been a longtime listener and supporter of your show, but because I do know some of the players on the Kickers. So Scotty Thompson, for example, his brother was my son's soccer coach, and Scotty actually gave me some one-on-one tips on how to actually kick with my left foot so I can be more effective in my over 40 leagues. So,
that's good. All right.
So I have a little bit of an affinity to Richmond because of that. And
we should add, Ira, when you say you've been a supporter, you have listened to the show, you have visited with us, you've come to we've hung out in Chicago a little bit, but also you joined the scouting network pretty early on. You're Ashley Sanchez, is that right?
That's right. So I cover Ashley Sanchez. So I'm waiting for that scouting report because she did pretty well at the beginning of the NCAA season for UCLA.
All right. I'm excited to get to that. But right now we should get to the Richmond Kickers, who I'm going to say have had another slight turnaround in their season. I think there have been a couple moments where it felt like, okay, now things are going to start clicking. A 2-game winning streak this past weekend, a 4-1 come from behind win against South Georgia Tormenta FC. Isaac, I know you were watching that one. I believe you were watching it with your son. You all did some detailed deep dive analysis, so I'm excited to hear what your thoughts were from this game.
Yeah, so I thought 2 things. I think, one, it was really good that Richmond didn't give up after they scored that goal. I think we've seen them at some points earlier in the season, like back in June when they had the long scoreless streak where they couldn't get a goal. They kind of gave up after they scored. So I think the mentality was better, and I think maybe having basically a 4-game unbeaten streak maybe gave them a little bit of confidence in order to come back in this one. The other thing was, though, that I'm still really worried about for Richmond is set-piece defending, because South Georgia could have had a goal in the second minute except for the left foot of Akira Fitzgerald.
Yeah, so we've talked to David Bulow a little bit about that one. Is there anything in particular you think the Kickers are doing that isn't working or just aren't doing? Because I'm with you that it does seem like they're very vulnerable in set pieces. The goal for South Georgia comes from a free kick, although it's a fairly unstoppable free kick in my opinion.
That one is not on set piece defending at all.
Yeah, no, not so much. That was it's one of those beautiful tings off the underside of the bar and then hits the ground, bounces back up. It's lovely to see, but it's maybe worth noting there that it does feel like the Kickers are vulnerable on set pieces because it feels like they concede a lot of set pieces in that area, and that is sort of a consistent concern for me, is resorting to fouling or needing to foul to maybe snuff out potential attacks, but that then leads to set pieces where the Kickers do seem vulnerable.
Yeah, but a lot of the set piece goals come usually from the sides, not necessarily from the run of play or from the center, except for obviously, Mickey Rose, 30-yard banger. But other than that, I think it's just that no one attacks the ball, that there's just some confusion maybe who's supposed to be attacking the ball when the ball's coming toward the 6 or the penalty spot on basically set piece crosses. And I think that with Coach Bulow has to try and figure that out, and they just have to be a little bit better on understanding what is everyone's role in those situations. So you had that one against Forward Madison a couple of weeks ago also, that was in a similar situation where the ball came over and no one really attacked the ball. So it's okay to stand up and make sure that if someone's coming in at you that they can't get through you. You're allowed to stand there, but I feel like sometimes they move to get out of the way as to not to foul someone, and because of that, you wind up giving away free headers, or the ball falls right into the box where it really shouldn't.
Yeah, and I think I take your point there, and I would take it one step further to say so you have that loss to Ford Madison where set pieces come into play. Then against Toronto FC 2, a 2-2 draw, Kickers go up 2-0, and then it's 2 goals from set pieces. They concede 1 this past weekend. So I think that's where my hesitation to get truly excited about 3 wins, 1 draw in the last 5 games. It's a decent record, but I still have those lingering concerns. But to your point, then for the Kickers to turn it around, obviously getting 4 goals is a decent way to do that. 2 of which came inside of 15 minutes. That's a decent way to respond. What do you credit with that turnaround?
So I think the defensive shape for the Kickers has changed. So what you noticed in this game, and I don't know if this is something that Coach Bulow kind of learned on some of his jaunts up to the Crew, because I know he's been working with the guys from the Columbus Crew on occasion, but basically playing 3 in the back in attack. So you see who's on the back line, but you have Akwe, Shanovsky, and Ivan, but it's not really 3 in the back. It's really 4 in the back, because Hughes was dropping in to play kind of as a left back on defense, but then in offense Hughes would go up and stay very tight to the left touch line, and so then you had defensive cover. And I think that's one of the things that has really helped over the last couple of months is that they haven't been beaten a lot on the break, right? So they've been beaten by set pieces, but they haven't necessarily been beaten as frequently as they had earlier in the season from the run of play. And I think that defensive line is. The other thing is I think Brandon Troyer playing as central defensive mid has really helped quite a lot too, because his vision and his ability to read the game and be able to step up and stop promising attacks has really been good. When he was playing as the right back, it didn't feel right, and he doesn't have the pace. And I think they were trying something similar to what they're doing now, but it just didn't work with Brandon Troyer as kind of a right center back to right right wing back kind of position, which is basically what Josh Hughes played in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because Braden Troyer has played, I think he played as left back for Lee Calishaw way back when. He's played right back this season, but it does resonate with me that once he starts being that kind of defensive midfielder for the Kickers, if not a number 6, then definitely a destroyer, or not a deep lying playmaker, but rather a destroyer number 6, I would say. And the key thing there for me is then supplants Maxi Rodriguez, who starts the season as captain, did a lot of defensive work, but also tended to drop in between those 2 center backs as opposed to kind of staying a little bit further up the way Troyer has. I think that also factors into the Kickers' turnaround, and I imagine that's a difficult spot for David Bulow to be in, because it's essentially his captain that he is now dropped, and when he does, the Kickers tend to get better results. So I'm with you that Troyer is a big part of that one.
Yeah, I think it's a style of play too. So the other thing that my co-host on League One Fun, Jason, mentioned yesterday, and I think he's absolutely right, is that when Matt Bolduc is playing well, kind of as the number 8, it really makes a big difference to the scoring opportunities that are created by the kicker. So he had been playing much wider earlier in the season, and now he's also coming a little bit more central and allowing Hughes and Eli Lockerbie to go up the other side, and Bolduc's able to make that great distribution. So the goal that Dennis Chin scored for I think it was the second goal that Dennis Chin scored, that was a direct result of Matt Bolduc making basically a line splitting pass right into the path of Dennis Chin, who was able to one time finish it. And so I think that's another of the tactical differences between now and say, May, June time period, when Richmond wasn't doing as particularly well, particularly in offense, right? Because yes, you lost 3-0 to North Texas, but so was everyone else, right? It's more that you were losing 1-0 games instead of those games being a draw or maybe a 2-1 win. Right?
Yeah, and it was a combination of not getting enough shooting opportunities, which I do think, again, it's not a shot at Maxey, but I think having your midfielder, Daryl and I talked about it plenty, but having your midfielder drop between the two center backs, the center backs spread wide, the fullbacks go forward, I get all that, but what tends to happen then is it pulls your central midfielders back, it pulls your attackers back, and you're just a little bit more compact, and even if you are able to play out and like establish possession, you're always kind of doing it further back in the field than higher up in the field, which is where you want to be trying to establish possession and opportunities. And so I think as the Kickers have been a bit more aggressive in their approach and have tried to get the ball forward a bit more regularly and readily, I think you've started to get more shooting opportunities. And then with that, they've started to take those shooting opportunities, which is also very important because there did seem to be in that stretch where they weren't scoring times when they like the cliche of like they couldn't buy a goal kind of fits that, like even when it seemed like okay they've got to score here, they're definitely going to score here, it's an open header, it's a one-on-one, they would find a way not to. And I think definitely like getting their heads down, conceding that one goal and feeling like oh here we go again, we're not going to be able to find the back of the net, it's going to finish 1-0. Once you start to get into that rhythm, it's really difficult to break out of. And I think this game is a good example of how things can be different. That first goal for Dennis Chin, it's essentially just chaos. And like there's handball shouts, the ball kind of pings around, it ends up at his feet, he's able to finish. And I think, you know, in mid-June, does he end up getting on the end of that one? Maybe, but does he end up finishing it? I don't think so, because I think if your confidence is low, if you're out of form, you maybe aren't in a position to kind of latch onto that one. And even if you do, your head's not in the right position to like just automatically finish. Instead, I think you're thinking about it and hoping it happens and thinking maybe I should shoot to the far post instead of the near post, or the near post instead of the far post. And once you start thinking, you start missing.
Well, I think on Dennis's first goal, like to your case in point, like he took it one time, and I think it was really smart that I would say here, I think Ivan really created this goal because the ball was pinging around, but the fact that Ivan was still up there, was playing center back, but he was up for a corner kick, and the ball got recycled, and when it came down and it was bouncing around in between about 7 players, it gets on. Ivan is facing away from goal, but he must have had the peripheral vision to see Dennis Chin right next to him and just flicks it with the outside of his left foot about 2 feet or so to Dennis Chin, who then took it one time and shot really hard. I think maybe for Dennis in particular, like I know you guys were talking on this show about how Dennis was very one-footed early on in the season and always seemed to try and get it on one foot, and then tried to be maybe a little bit too finesse. Now he's just, hitting it hard and low, just get it on frame. And he did that twice this game, and it worked out both times.
It certainly did. And then obviously it worked out for Joe Gallardo. He also gets a brace. The first goal, good. The second goal, very good. Ira, for you, is that a thing that you, from what you've seen of the Kickers, from what you've seen of Joe Gallardo, kind of expected, or was this a kind of next level goal for him?
Yeah, you mean the goal in the 80th minute that should win goal of the year?
Yes, that one.
That one. Yeah, so I guess we knew that he had it in him, right? Because one thing that Joe Gallardo has always done is been good at taking on teams 1-on-1, 1v2 even. This time it was 1v6, and he got around all 6 players. I guess I did expect that he had that ability. I think Joe's first goal, it showed, quite frankly, some of the issues that the Kickers had earlier in the season is taking these long-range shots that had a very low probability for success. But that second goal, he didn't have too many other options going on, and it was funny when you watch this goal because Dennis Chin was standing in between the 2 center backs as Joe was basically weaving around. It was almost like he was weaving around cones, quite frankly, how deftly he did it. But Dennis Chin is all upset that he didn't get the pass in right through the 2 center backs, but then starts to cheer after St. Vil gets nutmegged by Joe Gallardo and Joe finishes in the top netting. So I think that was good on Joe. I do think that in order to make Joe a more complete player and to help out his teammates, he does have to make those passes a little more. Maybe not in that specific situation, but there were other times even within this game that he had the ball and he had obvious passes on to either Hughes or to Dennis Chin or even to Bolduc that he just didn't take. And I think that he needs to definitely look up and think about passing a little bit more and being more of a facilitator instead of just taking everything on his shoulders.
See, it's a confusing situation because I don't necessarily disagree with you that I think if the Kickers played a little bit faster, got a little bit more possession, looked for combinations a little bit more quickly, they probably get more shooting opportunities. But at the same time, with what we're talking about with the Kickers failing to score for so long, that when Joe Gallardo is 35 yards, 40 yards from goal, maybe if he's feeling it, I don't mind him taking it because obviously that's where his first goal comes from. The Kickers' second is that kind of long range blast. But I would then argue that, while that's a great goal and well taken and well struck and it has weird spin on it, it's also definitely not going to be the consistent way he scores, whereas you would expect a few more passing combinations, a few more 1-2s through the middle. That seems the more likely route to get consistent goals.
Yeah, and that was the third goal, the Dennis Chin goal that with the pass from Matt Bulldog. That's kind of how that was created, where there were a couple of runs being made by Hughes on the left, and Bulldog got the ball right around midfield and was able to make that line-splitting pass. But I think earlier in the season, when you look at the shots that were being taken, they were all low probability, often outside of the box kind of shots. And so that's just the one thing that I don't want the Kickers to go back to. I want the Kickers to continue to do what they're doing now. And obviously it's been working. I mean, outside of the loss last week, it's really been working quite nicely. And I think that they need to do that. And, 4 more home games, right, for the Kickers over the next month. And they do have an outside shot at the playoffs. So but they have to win those home games and save serve in order to ensure that they have any kind of shot.
Yeah, and so let's talk about the maybe remainder of the season because, and I want to do so by maybe looking at the stats from this game because they tell a big tale for me. The Kickers have the majority possession. Possession is a statistic that you can go either way on, but you look at
on our show, by the way, we call it the trash stat.
See, there we go. Exactly. I'm glad we're on the same page. But in terms of duels won, Kickers dominant there. Aerial duels won, Kickers dominant again. Interception 17-9 for the Kickers. Even offside, Kickers offside 3-1. So even not the good stats. You don't want to be offside that regularly, but for the Kickers to be so attacking in a game, to me that is actually a positive stat. Not surprisingly, the only one they lose on would be corners, again set pieces coming into play. But I feel like all those stories tell the tale of a team that, to your point or to your initial point, fought back from going 1-0 down. Probably should have been 2-0 down. You're absolutely right about that save from Akira Fitzgerald. But have that work rate and have that kind of physicality combined with the technical ability to succeed. So with that in mind, I'm wondering if you think that maybe the Kickers have put themselves in a position where they can see this one out, potentially make the playoffs. If not make the playoffs, then at least have a strong finish to this season.
Well, I think they definitely have the ability to have the strong finish. The playoffs, they need help. Yeah. And one of the challenges that they'll have is that they basically need other teams to drop about 8 points in their remaining games who are in front of them. So the 3 teams that are in front of them in playoff order are FC Tucson, who currently is in 4th place on points per game. But then Madison, South Georgia Tormenta, and Chattanooga Red Wolves are all right behind FC Tucson and are all catchable by the Kickers, right? So the Kickers play all of those teams at least one more time. So basically, if the Kickers win their 4 home games, they beat Tucson on the road, then the Kickers can actually lose to North Texas away, which is fine, right? North Texas at the top anyway. They're probably going to win the league.
They're decent.
So then at that point, then they put themselves in really good shape to potentially come in 4th. But of course, they need basically a bunch of draws to occur with those teams in front of them otherwise, and they need those teams to lose some points. So they're not mathematically eliminated. There is a road to how to get there. It is a very uphill battle, but I think that they could take some solace if they were to win, say, 5 of the next of their next 7 games, and say, hey, we finished strong, we figured things out, and we really built something that we can work on for next season.
So let's do an abbreviated idea of the next couple games. So this coming Saturday, home to Greenville Triumph. From what you have seen of Greenville, if you were going to give David Bulow a Cliff Notes version of how to beat Greenville and how not to lose to Greenville at the same time, what would you tell him to focus on in the Kickers' attack and then to make sure they pay attention to in terms of Greenville's attack?
Well, I think not to lose is that Greenville is going to cross the ball a lot. That is Greenville's modus operandi. They always cross the ball from both sides. They're looking for Jake Keegan. They're looking for Gomez in the middle. He's their one kind of creative. He's their version of Joe Gallardo, although in my opinion Joe's probably a little bit better. But Jake Keegan is very good at finding seams, and he's able to get on some of those crosses. But they cross a lot. So, and that's obviously based on the set piece defending that Richmond's had. I think really what they're going to have to work on this week, and hopefully they have been working on this week, is really defending those crosses, clearing the ball out. If they don't have 20 clearances in this game, I think that's not going to be good for Richmond. I think on the offensive side, Greenville has a very disciplined defense. So I think what Richmond's going to have to do is basically get the ball into the final third and then try and possess there, because if they try and play counterattack or very direct type of soccer, it's not going to necessarily work out well for them, because Greenville has been pretty good all season in disrupting those kind of counterattacks. So when you watch them against FC Tucson or against TFC2, which likes to play that way as well, and also Chattanooga, Greenville's done well against those teams, whereas they haven't done as well against teams that possession the final third.
All right, so say the Kickers establish possession in the final third, deal with crosses, they get that win. Up next would be on the road Tuesday, September 10th, so only 3 days. It's a decent turnaround time. They're away to North Texas SC, who, despite looking unbeatable at the beginning of the season, now have shown that they are very much beatable on occasion. Lansing, I think, put 3 past them. That was the one that stands out to me. How did Lansing find a way through, or how could the Kickers potentially find a way through North Texas?
Oh, so Lansing did it by really keeping up the energy and having just more energy and emptying the tank, pressing North Texas and really disrupting the North Texas possession. And that's what you have to do. I'm not sure that Richmond's ready to do that, quite frankly. I mean, of course, I'm not Richmond's coach, but if I was, I would probably heavily rotate that game and just try and pack the box and just try and limit the damage. So, try to it's always dangerous going away from your core, kind of from your core playing style. But I think for that game, you almost have to, because, I mean, quite frankly, North Texas is just a more talented team. They're going to be playing at home. You're going to be on the road, and you have another game the following weekend, like 4 days later. So I would almost give up that game, because they also don't need it. Like, I'm assuming, like, when I made that prediction of how Richmond could make the playoffs, the way to do that is not necessarily to beat North Texas. It's to beat everybody else.
Okay. I like that. I like that approach. It's because it does make sense that, like, if you go all out against Greenville and, like, play a very smart game plan, and then you do try to emulate the Lansing formula and go all out, both, like, in terms of physical exertion, but overall effort, like, maybe you get that result against North Texas and maybe you get the result against Greenville, but now your players are totally exhausted with several games still to go. So I take your point that maybe that is a rotation, pack it in, and if you lose 2-0, you lose 2-0, but then you've got fresh starters for Saturday, September 14th, home to Ford Madison. That's maybe the last one I wanted to talk about. I don't want to make you go through every single team unless you feel inclined to do so. But Ford Madison, what should the Kickers be aware of there? And then how might the Kickers be able to beat them? Obviously, they've already played each other twice, both games in Madison. They split those two. So what are you expecting in this third one, Ira?
Well, I think they need to do exactly what they did the last time when they went to Madison and not give up a set piece goal, right?
Like, basically, that's it.
And I think it makes sense to stop there, because if Richmond doesn't win that game at home, then their playoff chances basically are gone. But if they win the 2 home games and they lose to North Texas, they still have an outside chance of making the playoffs. So Forward has 2 really good wingers, right? You guys know them pretty well now. That Paolo Jr. and Don Smart. J.C. Banks is in the middle for them as their number 9, as their striker. And I think the 3 in the back plan that Coach Bulow has in place really did a good job frustrating them last time. I mean, you could visibly see the Forward Madison players being frustrated by not being able to get high quality chances on Richmond up there. And remember, good on Richmond, good on you guys for limiting that, because that was actually the most attended match in all of USL League One so far. So, you had a raucous crowd, and, if the River City Red Army comes out in force and is making a lot of noise, maybe you could do that. You do the same thing against Madison and come away with a couple of goals, because you guys had some good looks in that game. I think you just needed to be more clinical.
All right. So, and we need to have like the flamingo noises, like our version of that, to throw them off. I don't know what a kangaroo noise would be, but a way to put them off on set pieces.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So the goal should be 6 points from those 3 games, and that puts the Kickers at least in a stronger position for the playoff hunt. Final sort of couple questions for you about the Kickers, kind of season as a whole, Ira. I wanted to ask, like, who are the players that you think have stood out for the Kickers in a good way, and then maybe are there any that have stood out in the wrong way?
So, certainly Joe Gallardo, I think he is someone who, has stood out, and it just, needs to, I think, just improve his vision again, like we talked about earlier. I've been pretty impressed with Dennis Chin, actually, and his development over the course of the season as well. So, and part of this might be chemistry, part of this is probably coaching, but he didn't look as effective earlier in the season than he has the last 5 or 6 weeks. So I think that he's been quite a revelation, I think, for the team. The disappointments. Kind of the team cohesion certainly back in May and June was a big disappointment, and I don't know if there was any individual players that you could really point to that. I think Maxi Rodriguez certainly one that looked very promising early, and I don't think you could say he was at fault for everything, but he definitely didn't seem, obviously given the run of form that they've had with him not playing, clearly maybe he didn't fit into what Coach Bulow had in mind.
That makes sense to me. And I want to add with Joe Gallardo that, like, that goal from this weekend, the second goal, like, I'm not saying he is, like, so good, he's a world beater or anything like that, but, like, the player who I see make those types of runs and score those types of goals most consistently is Lionel Messi. And if you watch that goal, you can see just a few of those moments of, like, Gallardo knows exactly what he's doing as he's dribbling across the middle, exactly how to set guys up and kind of slow up and then accelerate to get away. He waits that like little touch perfectly to set up the nutmeg, and then the nutmeg itself is perfectly so he can then get that shot off.
He definitely was trying to do that too.
Oh,
right?
yeah, exactly. And so, but then the choice, like where he finishes, how he finishes, all of that is sort of stuff like, not to oversimplify, but is stuff that you can't really coach. Like, you can help develop that, but those are all skills that he has already. So I'm with you that, like, develop a little bit more, get that kind of team play down, get the possession down, move the ball a little bit faster. And I think that's a guy who kind of skyrockets in my estimation in terms of where I think he ends up in his playing career. So that's been, I think, my bright spot to the season, is sort of to see in a player like Joe Gallardo all of the kind of strengths he has, but then some of the vulnerabilities and ways he has sort of addressed them, and then ways in which he still could potentially address them. That's what makes me pretty pumped for the remainder of the season, even if the Kickers don't make the playoffs. But that is my next question for you. If they don't make the playoffs, like obviously not getting to go to the postseason is always going to be a disappointment. But for the Kickers, who have the kind of long history that they do, who came in as a relatively stable organization, how big of a disappointment do you think it is to miss the playoffs, albeit in a league where, only 40% make it, as opposed to in Major League Soccer where I think 90%?
It's 52%. Yeah. So
you're better at stats than me.
Well, I'm an economist. Yeah. So I think it, for a fan, it has to be disappointing. But we have to remember this is a new team, right? So there's only 5 holdovers from last year, right? So Coach Bulow, yes, he was a holdover too, but he only had the team for half a season. So this is the first time, right? New league. I think if you're a fan, you have to be happy with the style that they're playing and how they're looking. Like, they're playing pretty soccer. And basically since beginning of July, they've been playing pretty soccer, even though they haven't always gotten the result. And I think that that's something you have to take some solace in and know that they're building towards something. My whole thing is now is, can the Kickers and can the coach and Matt Sparks, can they keep enough players
Matt
only
Spear,
add
the GM? Is that
Matt Spear? Excuse me.
Cool.
Yeah, Matt Spear. keep enough players and just add one or two pieces in order to take things to the next level. Because cleaning house every year like a lot of USL teams do, it doesn't make for the kind of cohesion and pretty soccer next year, because then you're always rebuilding every single year. So hopefully they can keep some of these players. Although it would not be surprising if one or two ended up on a championship or maybe even MLS team as a depth piece. Joe Gallardo potentially being one of them.
All right. Well, there we are. Well, Ira, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk all things USL League One, which we did for the Top Drawer Soccer Show. We broke down pretty much every team in the league and some young players for each team. And then obviously today talking Richmond Kickers with me, helping me make sense of that game and the come from behind victory, but then also making sense of the season as a whole and what to expect in the next couple games. That I'm very excited about, because now I have an idea of what to watch for and kind of grade whether or not the Kickers are responding accordingly. So thank you very much for all of those many things.
Great to be on with you, Taylor.